All right, so it's 2022 comes to an end. Also wraps up my first full year of being into MMA. I've dedicated numerous Saturdays to watching these fight nights and such like that, and just having a great time. And so this is kind of the first of a few end of the year videos where I talk about my favorite manga that I've read, um, favorite movies of 2022, as well as including with this video my top favorite fights, UFC fights of 2022. Um, some quick disclaimers. If you don't see any of your favorite fights on here, it could be for one of two reasons. One, I didn't watch it. I didn't watch every single fight that happened in this year. I tried to watch every single fight night, can't win them all, can't watch them all. So I either have not seen every single fight or the fight that's potentially on your top list, as well as just the fact that it might not be one of my favorite fights. This is a very subjective list. I don't just have 10 fights that I liked. I just could only fit a top 10 into 10 different entries. So so it's just my opinion. And these are just kind of going to be all my raw thoughts on these fights that the year, kind of going off the cuff. So some quick honorable mentions before we get into the official top 10. We have, let's see, we'll go with five, or I guess four or five. We have Davy Grant versus Lois Smoka. That was a really good bantamweight fight. Daniel Santos versus John Castaneda at UFC 261. Really good fight. Khamzat Chimaev versus Gilbert Burns. This is in a lot of people's top tens, top fives, even a lot of people's favorite fight of this year. Not my top 10, but still a great fight, classic down the road. And we're going to go with, for our last honorable mention, Charles Oliveira versus Justin Gaethje at UFC 274, a potential round of the year candidate. Excellent fight. Don't need to go into too much detail. Let's go into number 10. Number 10, we have Calvin Kattar versus Giga Chikadze. Apologies for any mispronunciation. This is one of the few fights on my top 10 that actually went the distance, and you guys know the story. I mean, it really is crazy. It really is telling of the sport and the type of sport that MMA is. If Calvin started up this year so strongly and still ended on a bad note. But at the beginning of this year, this seemed like to be Calvin's year in the featherweight division with a 5 round domination over Giga. What an excellent performance. I mean, you guys, once again, you know the story of how he was dominated in early 2021 against Max Holloway. He took a 50-45 fight, maybe even less. Max Holloway broke significant strike records on Calvin's face, and then Calvin comes back and just puts the ass whooping on Giga. I mean, yeah, lots of great moments in this fight. Calvin is a very entertaining fighter. I love his boxing. I loved his utilization of elbows. There's this one specific moment in the fight where Calvin just kind of hits Giga with the backhand, ducks a punch, and then hits him with another backhand. Like 25 minutes is a lot to cover, and there's just so many great moments of just great action from this fight. Calvin Kattar, excellent performance. Sad he had to end this year on a tough note with both a controversial split decision as well as an injury mid-fight against his third fight this year. But still an excellent fight. And not as much people talk about it, mainly because it's at the beginning of this year, and it's probably going to be overshadowed by his losses. But hats off to Calvin Kattar. I look forward to seeing you back again. So number 9, we have probably the most wholesome fight on this list, and that is Stephen Thompson versus Kevin Holland during their Thompson versus Holland on ESPN main event. This is this was the most wholesome fight of the year. Just two strikers who were very respectful of each other, and they made full intentions of like, hey, we're not going to shoot, we're not going to wrestle. Let's just throw hands, and throw hands they did. This fight had moments from both fighters. Kevin Holland had his moments. He showed that he does belong at the top to be able to, put so much pressure and be pretty successful against a renowned striker like Thompson. But of course, man, Stephen Thompson in his old age of 39, for the sport at least, to put on that performance and that masterclass of striking, great kicks, great, punches, great kicks, great timing, great defense, counters. It was a beautiful fight. And I guess one way to illustrate how entertaining this fight was, my dad and my younger sister actually saw this fight because I was playing on the TV, and they actually sat down and watched it because they're just so intrigued and so entertained. With my dad, it's not a surprise. He doesn't really watch fights, but he can get into it. You know what I mean? He got me into martial arts movies. No no barrier of entry for fighting, but my younger sister Priscilla, who isn't really into fights at all, actually sat down and watched this fight because she was just so entertained by this, you know, strike fest that we had. So yeah, I think this is a good fight to kind of get casuals into. Not much wrestling. Not to say that wrestling isn't entertaining, but from an outsider's perspective, yeah, this could turn a lot of heads. So excellent fight. Hats off to both performers. Really great performances from both. Next up at number 8, we have a heavyweight banger, and that was the main event for Ciryl Gane versus Tuivasa in Paris. I mean, this fight had kind of everything you wanted from a heavyweight fight. It had swinging and banging. Both people had that. Both fighters had this like knockout power to send the other opponent down. We saw a great showmanship of skill from Ciryl Gane, as well as excellent heart from Tuivasa. I mean, this had both the skill that you would want in a fighter to have, as well as just the swinging and banging knockout power, right? All at once. Both fighters had their moments. This was a very investing battle. Not to mention the crowd was awesome too. The crowd in Paris, I believe, like broke into like I think it was they started singing the French national anthem during the fight. So yeah, excellent energy for the crowd and a fight that we knew was going to be awesome, but when it happened, you're just like, yeah, yeah. Moving on to number 7, we have Matt Schinell versus Sue Madaerji. That was on ABC. Ortega versus Rodriguez. Yeah, as far as round of the year goes, I think that goes to this fight right here. In the second round with Matt Schinell and Sue, Sue was just pounding away at Matt's head with elbows and strikes. I was surprised that dude was still standing. He took like 12 elbows point blank to the face. It was still moving forward, and of course the big rally towards the end of the fight in the second round with Matt Schinell on top, just raining down the fists. And John Anik said himself, Matt Schinell was a warrior, and man, what a finish! What a finish! Triangle choke, I believe. Both fighters are all bloodied up. It really was a war. Like that is a war as you can get. Excellent fight, round of the year. Not much else to say. Number 6, we have a featherweight fight, and that was Nate Landwehr versus David Onama. This was the UFC on ESPN. Cheeto versus Dominic Cruz. As far, Stephen Thompson versus Kevin Holland was a very wholesome fight with a lot of respect and sportsmanship. Sometimes you just got to have a fight where both dudes just hate each other and want to like hurt each other. There's nothing wrong with having a few fights like that once in a while, and that's what we got here. Both fighters have their moments. Round 1 definitely went to Onama, pretty much dominating. That second round, Nate bounced back and started dominating Onama. Yeah, just brutality, violence, anger. You kind of love to see it sometimes. And of course, that really savage moment at the end, or not even at the end of the third round, just like only 45 seconds in or something like that, where Nate was like pummeling Onama, and he just gets up. He just gets up with like 3-4 minutes left in the fight. That was one of the most savage moments of the year. Got to be for sure. Excellent banger. Number 5, we reached the top 5. This might surprise a lot of people. You know what? I don't need to justify. Let's just tell you. That would be Cheeto versus Rob Font in the main event of that UFC card. This wasn't really much of a fight in terms of like exciting moments, right? Where it's just, where the crowd is screaming and such like that. Yes, it had some knockdowns that garnered some pretty awesome reactions, but this was just an awesome striking display, from start to finish. You know what I mean? Very consistent, consistently well paced. You know what I mean? Rob Font was um what do you call it? He was approaching all-time strike records with the amount of significant strikes he was landing on Cheeto. And if you have a fight where Rob Font is dishing out a lot of strikes, and like I said, almost breaking records, like entering top 10 all-time records, and he still has a chance to lose, that's how you know he had a really good fight. Loved Cheeto's performance in this fight. He's very durable. Even though he took a lot of strikes, he looked pretty unfazed. And then eventually, when the main event rounds came on, he hit the gas and really put it on Rob Font. Like Rob Font at the end of that fight was unrecognizable. You know, really not much else to say. I mean, this was just a really great full 25-minute fight. Yeah, not really much else to say. Love Cheeto. This made me a Cheeto fan because of it. All right, so yeah, hats off, hats off. And then Rob Font, the dude's got a heart of a lion, man. To miss weight and to take a beating like that, to still fight all the way to the very end. Respect to both fighters. All right, we're entering top 4. What's it gonna be? Maybe you guys have some ideas, but let's see if you guessed it. Paulo Costa versus Luke Rockhold at UFC 278. This was the weirdest fight on this list. This was the first event in a long time to take place in Salt Lake City, so a lot of fighters didn't really account for the elevation. So the oxygen's thinner, and fighters got gas quickly. By the end of the first round of this fight, Luke Rockhold, you know, after like a year or more of inactivity, already had his hands on his knees. I thought at that moment, like, yeah, Luke is gonna get finished. He is already gassed. But it turns out Paulo Costa was gassed too. And what we got was something really interesting. Have you ever played like UFC, any of the UFC games, and you know how when you throw a strike, your stamina bar depletes a little bit, And if you throw too much, it gets to the point where you have to stop and wait for it to recover, right? This fight felt like every single strike that these fighters threw would completely damage or not would deplete their stamina bar. And every single strike they threw just took all of their heart and all their energy at a time. And they were just waiting until they had that energy back to throw the next strike. Um, yeah, really awesome display of chaos. Luke Rockhold, man, hats off to him. Happy retirement, man. And Paulo Costa, this dude always turns in entertaining fights. And we can't forget what probably is my most savage moment of the year at the end of the third round, at the end of the fight where Luke just um, smothers his broken, bloody nose all over Paulo Costa's face, getting all of his blood everywhere. Awesome moment. As far as retirement fights go where you lose, I don't think Luke Rockhold could have had a better swan song. So this really had a lot of great energy, extremely entertaining. Yeah, just a really awesome middleweight fight. Number 3, we're entering top 3 territory. Number 3 is Dustin Poirier versus Michael Chandler at UFC 281. Card of the year, by the way. As you guys may know, I'm a huge Dustin Poirier fan. He's my favorite fighter. And coming off of that loss against Charles Oliveira for the championship really hurt. And to see him bounce back to go into this fight was awesome. As a Dustin Poirier fan, and I'm a Michael Chandler fan too, but Dustin Poirier is my favorite. I kind of got both sides of the scale with this fight. It was a very close first round, but then Dustin taking control at the end of the first round, hitting him with those combos, nearly taking Chandler out of there. That agonizing second round where Michael Chandler dominated in the wrestling, right? And that final third round where Dustin was able to turn it around in the grappling and submit Michael Chandler. You know what I mean? Like, that was not only an awesome finish, it was so unexpected. Not to say that Dustin hasn't gotten submission finishes before, but in his prime, in terms of his main stand up, his main game plan, you just did not expect him to submit Michael Chandler. So yeah, as a Dustin Poirier fan, this was an awesome fight. I did say that I don't think that maybe people would be saying this is fight of the year, or people would still prefer Michael Chandler versus Justin Gaethje. But I mainly said that in a general sense because of that second round. Not to say that it wasn't, or not to say that was boring, but um, Gaethje versus Chandler was just kind of balls to the walls for 15 minutes, whereas Dustin Poirier versus Chandler kind of had a lull. But that's not to say I still didn't love this fight. You know what I mean? What an awesome show of heart and toughness from Dustin Poirier, and Michael Chandler turning in an awesome fight once more. Super invested, and yeah, my most anticipated fight of the year, and it lived up to the hype, and then some. Top 2. Number 2 is a surprise. I think this is the only prelim fight on this list, but that's Jake Collier versus Chris Barnett, heavyweight fight. Man, this was a roller coaster. You know what I mean? Not Chandler. Chris Barnett got dropped by Jake in like the opening seconds of that first round and was nearly finished. Right? When he went back to his chair at the end of the first round, they were talking about like, oh, Chris Barnett might have a broken jaw. You know what I mean? And such like that. And then for the heart, man, this was the biggest, in my opinion, the biggest display of heart out of my list. Chris Barnett just turns the tables and puts Jake Collier down, and he pounds at him and pounds at him for what feels like forever. It felt like the entire round. It was probably like a full minute of just Chris Barnett just punched Jake Collier on the ground, trying to finish it. The absolute hype from this fight from the crowd. This was just a prelim fight. This is on the main card, but then the people were rallying behind Chris Barnett. They're like, Chris Barnett, Chris Barnett, and I was so invested. I arguably haven't been invested in a fight more, other than just a few on this list, than I was behind Chris Barnett to take the win. And man, when Chris Barnett achieved that finish and did his classic front flip somersault to celebrate, that was one of my favorite payoffs from this year. Just an awesome showmanship of heart and toughness from heavyweights. Yeah, I mean, and Chris Barnett didn't even mention all the struggles he was going through prior to that week, with his wife dying, such like that. Didn't even mention it at all. Yeah, the dude's got a lot of heart, and yeah, probably the most hype fight on this list. Arguably, second to my first pick. I said all my favorite fights. You probably know what's coming. Number 1 is Glover Teixeira versus Jiri Prochazka at UFC 275. This fight has everything. If you want to get into mixed martial arts, if you want to get into MMA, this is a great fight because this has everything. This fight had displays of skill, it had displays of toughness, it had displays of heart, chaos, hype, fighters adjusting to each other mid fight. There's awesome exchanges on the feet with Jiri Prochazka obviously getting the better. There was awesome exchanges on the ground with Glover Teixeira normally being the perpetrator. Yeah, like everything about this fight was amazing, and the fact that it went for almost the full distance of just chaos, 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 chaos for 24 minutes and 40 seconds. And nothing could have prepared you for that last round in which Glover Teixeira almost finishes Jiri Prochazka on the feet. And then not 30 seconds later, Jiri Prochazka finishes Glover Teixeira on the ground. Like, that just shows how awesome this sport is, how unpredictable, the heights that can reach, and the unpredictability of it. Yeah, this is the epitome of MMA, I have to say. If I were to put it into one fight this year, this fight would be it. Show this to anyone who wants to get into MMA. It'll show you pretty much everything that MMA has to offer in an entertaining way. Yeah, this Glover Teixeira versus Jiri Prochazka was my fight of the year in 2022. Easily one of my favorites of all time. Hats off to both fighters. Awesome heart. Um, Glover Teixeira showed that he still belongs out here. 40 years old, giving a prime Jiri Prochazka the fight of his life. Yeah, sad we get to see a rematch, but I'm very happy with what we got. So this is my list. Thank you all for watching. Yeah, leave below your favorite fights of this year as well as the order. I know that I think I got most of them, but of course people are gonna disagree with me. So yeah, feel free to share your favorite fights. Could only fit 10 in here, but yeah, mixed martial arts. Gotta love it. Gotta love it.